When July began, Dave had the box resting on the toilet seat with a hole cut in the middle, and to everyone's amazement, who would have believed it? Galway was actually climbing into the box and doing her business through the hole. As much as possible, Dave would try to be there to flush as soon as she was done. A cat has an instinctive need to cover up her business. It seemed to be the least that he could do. He tried to impress this on everyone else, to be there to flush when he couldn't. And then one evening, they were downstairs having supper, and the upstairs toilet suddenly flushed, and everyone stopped eating, and they looked at each other, and Morley said, "Who was that?" And Dave said, "Sweet Jesus." And he dropped his cutlery, and he lurched upstairs, and there was Galway, standing in her litter box with her head at the hole, watching the water swirling around and around in the toilet below her. Who would have believed it? Dave was ecstatic. He was home free. He'd keep enlarging the hole and trimming the sides of the box until all that was left He'd keep enlarging the hole and trimming the sides of the box until all that was left was a cardboard toilet seat cover. Eventually, he could do away with that, and then maybe he'd write a book. Get rich. And then out of the blue, disaster struck. It struck at 10 one night while Dave was watching the news on television. The toilet flushed, and Dave looked around. Morley was beside him. Sam was in his room. Stephanie was out. The small smile that was tugging at the corner of Dave's mouth widened, pride before the fall. As Dave sat in front of the television feeling prideful, a hideous shriek filled the house. A piercing shriek of desperation unlike anything Dave had heard in his life. A howling, yowling, wailing wall of terror. Morley reached over and gripped Dave's arm. The shriek was so horrifyingly loud that it lifted the hair off both of their necks. Dave thought, there's a maniac loose upstairs, hacking Sam apart with an axe. Except it sounded worse than that, worse than murder. So desperately worse that it was no longer the sound of murder, it was murder itself. Come to life on his second floor. Murder was in his house, and it sounded just like someone trying to flush a cat down the toilet. Dave said, "Oh my God." He pried Morley's hand free and he flew up the stairs. Sam, who was already up the stairs, was on his way down, his eyes as wide as saucers. "There's a huge sewer rat climbing out of the toilet," he said. And he pushed past his father and went right out the front door. Dave threw himself into the bathroom. He had to look twice to be sure it was Galway. The bottom of the cardboard litter box had given way just as the toilet had flushed. Galway had fallen into the toilet at its fullest. She had plugged the hole so the water in the bowl couldn't escape. She was drenched, her wet, matted hair pressed to her rat-thin body, the toilet slurping and sloshing and overflowing, Galway yowling and clinging to the rim of the bowl as the centrifugal force of the water slowly dragged her around. Dave watched her make one complete rotation. And then without thinking, Dave reached out to pull her to safety. He had heard all the warnings about going near drowning people. He had missed the ones about drowning cats. When he reached out with his arms, Galway sunk her claws deeply into his wrists, and Dave screamed, and he flung the cat over his head. And the whiplash effect launched her the length of the hall. She landed in a soggy and pathetic pile of wet fur in front of Sam's bedroom door. Then she hit the ground running, and they didn't see her for another week. Now, this, as I said, all happened last summer, the summer before the one we've just come through. Dave put her litter box back in the kitchen, and you would have thought she would have never ventured back into the bathroom again. Strangely, she did. She began flushing the toilet again in the autumn. She didn't use it, mind you. Wouldn't even get on the seat. She'd get onto the bathtub and then jump onto the sink, and from there she could reach over and with her front paw push the lever on the toilet tank and stare at the water as it went around and around. She always liked that part, said Dave. Now, this seemed harmless enough until Arthur started to get into the act. Arthur and the cat would get in the bathroom together, Galway would flush, and then Arthur would bark his approval. And then Galway started knocking things into the toilet before she flushed it. Bobby pins, toothpaste, bottles of nail polish, hairbrushes. They had the plumber in 3 times before they figured this out. Once they did, they cleared the top of the tank, and then Arthur began bringing her things.